The Gospel of Luke and the Acts of the Apostles are traditionally read as historical accounts. One presents the story of Yeshua's life and death. The other continues with the story of what happened after him. But when these two books are read carefully and read together as a single literary project, a different picture emerges. They do not function primarily as neutral historiography. They function as theology conveyed through narrative. Let us begin with the Gospel of Luke. From the very beginning, Luke signals the kind of text he is writing. The story opens with angelic announcements, prophetic songs, and visions. We are told of a child conceived not through ordinary human means, but through divine initiative. These opening scenes are not presented as biological explanations. They are theological statements about meaning, origin, and purpose. As the narrative unfolds, Yeshua is portrayed primarily as a prophet in Israel's tradition. He announces good news to the poor. He welcomes those who are excluded. He challenges systems of wealth, power, and religious prestige. Luke places particular emphasis on mercy and reversal. The Good Samaritan becomes the moral example. The prodigal son is welcomed before he can prove himself worthy. Forgiveness precedes moral repair. Toward the end of the Gospel, the tone shifts once again. Yeshua predicts his death and travels toward Jerusalem. He is arrested and crucified. But in Luke's account, Yeshua does not die in despair or abandonment. He prays for those who execute him. He assures a condemned man beside him that he will be received into paradise, and he entrusts his life to God with confidence and trust. The resurrection narratives that follow are neither uniform nor triumphant in a simple sense. Different people encounter Yeshua in different ways. Some do not recognize him at first. Some doubt. Some are afraid. Yeshua is alive but transformed, and he appears and disappears in ways that resist easy explanation. This leads directly into the Acts of the Apostles. Acts opens with the risen Yeshua spending time with the apostles over a period of days. He speaks with them. He instructs them about what is to come. He prepares them for a future in which he will no longer be physically present. Then, in a final scene, he is taken from their sight and disappears into a cloud. This scene is not a description of physical travel. In Jewish tradition, the cloud represents divine presence and divine withdrawal. The point of the scene is not where Yeshua goes, but that his role in the narrative changes. The story of Yeshua gives way to the story of the community. Immediately after this comes Pentecost. The Spirit is poured out upon the gathered disciples, and the text describes people from many regions hearing the message in their own native languages. This scene is often misunderstood. It is not about ecstatic or unintelligible speech. It is about communication, about accessibility, about a message that crosses cultural and linguistic boundaries. The story functions as a deliberate reversal of the Tower of Babel. Where language once divided humanity, it now connects. Shortly afterward, Acts introduces the story of Ananias and Sapphira. We are told that a married couple sells a piece of property. They decide to keep part of the proceeds for themselves, which they are free to do, but they present the remaining amount as if it were the full sum and lie to the community about it. When their deception is exposed, first Ananias and then Sapphira suddenly collapse and die. Read as literal history. This story raises severe moral and theological problems. The punishment appears wildly disproportionate to the offense. Read as a theological narrative, however, the story functions differently. It marks the seriousness of trust and integrity at the founding of a new community. Similar stories appear in the Hebrew scriptures when new phases in Israel's life begin. The point is not that God routinely kills those who lie. The point is that a community built on deception cannot endure. As the story continues, the apostles come into conflict with political and religious authorities. They are arrested and imprisoned for their public teaching. On more than one occasion, Acts tells us that an angel opens the prison doors and leads them out. The guards remain unaware. The authorities are left confused and powerless. These scenes are not meant to describe prison security failures. They function as narrative theology. Human institutions attempt to restrain the movement. But God's purpose cannot be confined. Acts also tells us of dramatic healings. In one prominent scene, Peter encounters a man who has been unable to walk since birth and has spent his life begging at the entrance to the temple. Peter tells him that he has no money to give, but offers him what he does have. The man is raised to his feet, begins to walk, and enters the temple, praising God. The healing is not the climax of the story. It immediately leads to public amazement and theological explanation. Just as in the gospel narratives about Yeshua, the sign opens the way for interpretation. Later, Peter experiences a vision in which a large sheet descends from heaven, filled with animals considered unclean according to the law. A voice commands him to kill and eat. Peter refuses, insisting that he has never violated dietary law. The voice responds that what God has declared clean must no longer be called unclean. Peter himself explains the meaning of the vision soon afterward. It is not about food. It is about people. The vision prepares him to enter the home of a non-Jew and recognize that God does not show favoritism. Throughout Acts, this pattern continues. Visions guide decisions. Miracles mark turning points. Speeches interpret events rather than merely report them. The book contains 28 chapters, filled with extraordinary stories. It is impossible to examine each one in detail. But that is not necessary, because the overall pattern is unmistakable. When extraordinary events are not occasional interruptions but the standard mode of storytelling, the question is not whether the text is credible. The question is whether it is being read according to the wrong genre. This becomes especially clear when Acts is compared with Paul's own letters. In the letter to the Galatians, Paul describes his conversion and early activity as a follower of Yeshua. This is our earliest source for these events, written by Paul himself. Paul insists that he did not receive his message from other humans. He did not immediately travel to Jerusalem. He did not consult the apostles. Only after several years did he meet a small number of leaders, and those encounters were brief and limited. Paul's purpose is clear. He is defending the independence and divine origin of his message. When we read Acts, we encounter a different presentation. Paul is integrated more quickly into the movement. His relationship with the Jerusalem leaders appears smoother. Conflicts are minimized. These differences are not minor. They involve chronology, emphasis, and relationships. This does not mean that Acts is false. It means that Acts is telling the story for a theological purpose. Paul writes autobiographically and polemically. Acts writes narratively and conciliatorily. Galatians gives us Paul's voice. Acts gives us interpretation. And this confirms what we have seen throughout. The Gospel of Luke and the Acts of the Apostles are written by the same author, with the same style, and with the same theological project. They are therefore meant to be read in the same way, not as modern history, but as theology in narrative form. They do not primarily seek to document what happened. They seek to interpret what it meant, for new communities, for non-Jews, for a world in transition. Read in this way, the text becomes coherent. Chloe, thank you for listening. If you have reflections, additions, or corrections, you are warmly invited to share them in the comments. Thoughtful dialogue helps deepen understanding. Peace and blessings to you all.